Hi, everyone. My name's Melissa. My parents got divorced when I was in junior high. I stayed with my mom. A year and a half later, she got married to someone she'd met online. He lived in another country. My mom said we had to move there, but I didn't want to, so I went to live with my dad instead. He owns a very famous restaurant. It's only open in the evenings. You have to book a table months in advance to be able to eat there. One day, my dad called me into his office. When I came in, he jumped up from his seat. "I have a surprise for you," he said. After a while, he came back with a woman. He said, "Melissa, I want to introduce you to Delia. Delia is the purchasing manager at the restaurant. We've been together for a while. I'm sure you'll be surprised to hear this. Delia and I have decided to get married." Just like he said, that caught me by surprise. "Really?" was all I could say. 2 months after this conversation, my dad married Delia. So that's how I got a beautiful young stepmother. I don't want to sound prejudiced, but Delia seemed to me like the gold digger type. I thought she only married my dad, who is much older and is also her boss, for his money. My dad is no billionaire, but he is pretty well off. But it wasn't something I could bring up with him because from what I could see, he was madly in love with his new wife. As time passed, I got to know Delia better. She was definitely a gold digger. She was constantly going shopping for shoes and expensive handbags. I saw her showing off all the jewelry that my dad had bought for her to her friends. She'd converted a large bedroom into a walk-in closet. It was stuffed with expensive clothes. She continued to shop online in the evenings. She was getting stuff delivered to the house all the time. No matter how much she bought, it was never enough. Though I couldn't stand Delia, I could never say anything to her either. But one day, I noticed that her attitude towards me had suddenly changed. Until then, she used to ask me, "How are you doing? How is school?" She used to try to chat with me. But something happened and she stopped talking to me. She wouldn't even look at me. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, it dawned on me. I thought I had figured out why my stepmother was acting differently towards me. For years, I've kept a diary. For me, it's the same as going to therapy. I was able to overcome many of my issues thanks to this. Before I go to bed, I always write down whatever happened that day. So, had Delia secretly been reading my diary? That was my theory. If she had read my diary, it meant she had found out what I really thought of her. I'm sure she did not like that one bit, because everything I wrote about her was negative. So it made perfect sense that she'd get upset and stop talking to me. I used to leave my diary on a bookshelf in my room, but now I started carrying it in my bag. One night as I was writing, I realized something. I was censoring my thoughts about my stepmother. I wasn't writing the bad stuff about her in case she might end up reading it. This made me really uncomfortable. I told myself, I don't care if she reads it, I'll write whatever I think, and that's exactly what I did. One evening, I was in my room when my dad came in. Looking all serious, he said, "Melissa, I want to talk to you about something very important." He said, "Your education is really important. In class, you should be focusing on what the teachers say and nothing else." I stared at him in shock. "Dad, where is this coming from now? Did the school call you?" "No, they didn't call me. It doesn't matter how I found out. Please just pay attention to your studies," he said. After my dad left, I started thinking, what was that all about? Why did my dad need to give me that talk? And then I got it. It seemed like my stepmother had read my diary again, because I had recently written that I had a crush on someone, and I wasn't able to concentrate in class because I couldn't stop thinking about him. Delia had read this and immediately told my father about it. To me, this meant that my stepmother had declared war on me. She had started using what she learned from my diary to destroy my relationship with my dad. I was so angry I couldn't sleep all night. Who did she think she was? I decided to talk to her the following day. She wasn't home when I came back from school. After a while, she arrived again, carrying a ton of shopping bags. I went up to her and said, "I know you've been reading my diary. You need to stop doing that." She answered, "No, I'm not. Why would I be interested in your boring life?" "Then why did my dad give me the focus on your studies talk?" "I know you read that from my diary and told him," I replied. "I'm not interested in you or your diary. Please don't involve me in your childish games," she snapped back. That night, I talked to my dad about it, but I couldn't convince him. Delia is not someone who would read your diary. That's your private life. And she's civil enough to respect that, he said. He was obviously protecting his wife. Of course, I was sure she had read it, but my dad was still far too in love with her to see what was happening. I had to find a way to prove that Delia was reading my diary, and I did. I had written earlier that I thought Delia was a gold digger, and she had read that. So I decided to write some things that weren't exactly true. Do you want to know what I wrote? Here it is. My stepmother really pissed me off today, so I talked to my dad tonight. Deep into our chat, I asked him, "Dad, why did you marry this woman? All she cares about is your money. Don't you realize that?" My dad replied, "Unfortunately, I've begun to suspect this as well. I love her very much, but she is shopping nonstop, and that's not normal at all." Yes! My dad is now becoming suspicious that she is a gold digger. He will definitely see the truth soon. That's what I wrote in my diary. Of course, I never had that conversation with my dad. I made up every word of it. My plan was really simple. My stepmother would read what I had written and ask my dad, "How could you think that about me?" So my dad would immediately come and talk to me. And first, I would prove that Delia had been reading my diary. And second, my dad would know what I thought about her, and maybe he would start having some doubts about her too. The next day, I left my diary on my desk and went to take a shower. I spent a long time in the shower to give my stepmother plenty of time to read it. I was wondering what would happen next. My dad didn't come to my room that night. That meant my stepmother hadn't talked to him. He didn't come the next day either. What happened? Why hadn't Delia confronted my dad? Would she keep quiet after what she'd found out? Yes, for some reason, she kept quiet. Do you know what she started doing instead? She began removing everything she had bought from our house. Of course, she was doing this secretly. But every time I looked into her walk-in closet, I noticed there were fewer and fewer of those expensive bags, shoes, and clothes. Where was she bringing all this stuff and why? Since my plan didn't work out exactly like I hoped, I decided to write something that could have a bigger impact. Here is what I wrote. I stopped by my dad's restaurant today. He looked really sad. I asked him why. He didn't want to tell me at first, but then he said, "I'm thinking about divorcing Delia. Unfortunately, our suspicions have been confirmed." I was both happy and surprised by this unexpected news. I think she'll finally be out of here soon. Do I need to spell it out? Of course I made all that up too. Again, I left my diary lying around and jumped into the shower. I was sure my stepmother was reading the things I wrote about her while I was in there. My dad was at the restaurant that night. I was so curious about what would happen. This time, it would definitely come out that my stepmother had read my diary. I thought Delia would call my dad on the phone and my dad would rush home, but again, things didn't pan out as I expected. The house was really quiet. I ran into Delia as I was going into the kitchen. She was about to go out with a huge suitcase. She left without even looking at me. Of course, I panicked big time because of me. My stepmother had left home. I called my dad. I couldn't tell him about my diary. I only told him that Delia had left with a suitcase. Dad came home immediately. "Delia's phone is turned off. I can't reach her," he said. I couldn't tell him the truth because I was so scared. Half an hour later, my dad said, "Melissa, I realized something weird. Delia took all her jewelry with her. Perhaps that's normal, but there was a considerable amount of cash in the safe. She took it all. But that's the company's money. And Delia knows this. I don't want to use this word, but this counts as theft." And then he went to the police. He learned unbelievable things about Delia there. It turns out she was, in fact, a professional gold digger. She would marry much older, well-off men and then steal their money. She'd start working for people whom she had set her eyes on. Then she would start flirting with them. After marrying them, she would take as much of their money as she could and then disappear. I had figured out that she was a gold digger, but obviously I couldn't have guessed this much. Quite a bit of time passed. Then one day, I saw Delia on the news on TV. She had trapped someone rich again. But this time, the man found out the truth after doing some research before marrying her. And he went to the police. I was really relieved to see Delia in handcuffs. It turned out that she'd been hiding the jewelry and the money she stole in a safe at her mother's house. This is how my dad got back his company's money and most of the jewelry he bought for Delia. By the way, I keep saying Delia, but it turned out her real name is Fiona. With every marriage, she was making up a new name and using a fake ID. Months later, I was able to tell my dad the truth about the diary. I couldn't foresee what his reaction would be. He burst out laughing. "Just like your mom, you're a force to be reckoned with," he said. My only intention had been to prove my stepmother had been reading my diary. But my little game ended up leading to something I could have never expected.
Hi guys, my name is Adam. I'm 14 years old. My parents are doctors. My sister is 3 years older than me. We're a happy family. We have lots of fun together. We always look on the bright side of every situation. Unfortunately, something very upsetting happened recently. It made me realize that you can grow up and mature in a matter of days. My uncle and his family live in another city. They visit us once or twice a year, always bringing us gifts when they come. During their last visit, they brought us a box of chocolates that they had bought in Belgium. We finally understood why Belgian chocolate is so famous. They were all so delicious, so we ate a little too much. My mom had to take the box away from us. "If they're that good, don't finish them all in one sitting. You can only have one per day, and I'll give them to you," she said. We weren't happy, but she was the boss, and we knew that she wasn't going to back down. The next day, when my parents were at work, we remembered the chocolates. Not that we ever stopped thinking about them. Where could my mom have hidden them? If we managed to find them, she'd be angry, but we also knew that it wouldn't be long before she forgave us. So we started looking for the chocolates, but we couldn't find the box anywhere. It looked like my mom was really serious about hiding it. We started looking in the least likely spots. When we were searching through my dad's desk, we found a key that looked really old. There was a wooden box in his room. My dad had worked at a hospital in Afghanistan at some point. We knew that my parents were often writing to each other then. All the letters were inside that box. Could my mom have hidden the chocolates there? We opened the box with the key. And bingo! We were so happy and started eating right away. Meanwhile, my sister started jokingly reading a letter that my dad had written. "My beloved, the days are short, but the months don't seem to end. I have missed you so much." So I started going through the box to find a letter from my mom to read as a response. I came across a folder. I showed it to my sister and read what it said on it: Child Protection Services, Adoption Department. We looked at each other in confusion. Would we be crossing the line if we opened the folder? But we couldn't stop. My mom came in just as we were about to open the folder. But she didn't say anything. She just gulped. In a very calm voice, "Go to your rooms, both of you," she said. We didn't look inside. "I know what we did was wrong, but aren't you going to tell us what's going on?" my sister asked. My mom didn't even look and just showed us the door. I said, "Go to your rooms." We left without saying another word. We had kind of figured it out. When I went to my room, I immediately Googled Child Protection Services Adoption Department. Just as I thought, these documents were about adoption. I texted my sister the link. She replied with another link about the same subject. She was also trying to find answers online. My dad came home soon after. We didn't know what was going on, but the house was very tense. We were waiting anxiously in our rooms. I heard my mom call my sister. Then I heard the front door close. Where could they have gone? I was so curious. Just then my dad came in. He said my mom and sister went out for a walk. He was being really quiet, as if he didn't know where to begin. A few times he cleared his throat, but still didn't manage to say anything. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Adam, I want this to stay between us, at least for a while," he said. I was getting more and more nervous. I didn't want to hear the rest. Why couldn't they have told me I was adopted? Didn't they think that it would come out eventually? Tears started falling from my eyes. I wasn't crying. I just couldn't stop the tears from falling. My dad looked at me. "Adam, it's time you learned the truth, but promise me that you won't tell your sister that she is adopted. This is really important. Deal?" he said. "Wait a minute. It's my sister who is adopted?" I looked at him in shock. I should have been happy because I'd felt so sad when I thought that it was me, but it was my sister who was adopted. That idea was so painful. This meant that my sister wasn't my real sister, right? She would be so sad if she found out that I wasn't her real brother. Of course, I couldn't tell her this. Even if my dad told me to tell her, I would keep this a secret forever. I couldn't bear making her sad. The next few days were very difficult. It was as if my sister and I had made a pact not to mention that day again. But I could see that the love between us was even stronger now. She was coming to my room a lot, making all these weird faces to make me laugh. I knew that whether or not she was my biological sister, she was my real sister. In fact, I started to love her even more after finding out that she was adopted. People naturally love their siblings, but loving someone you're not related to is so much more meaningful. Don't you agree? Pretty soon, we were as happy as we used to be. I had already forgotten about what had happened. In fact, I was planning on saying to my dad, "Let's tell my sister everything. It really doesn't matter that she's adopted. I love her more than a biological sister." Just around that time, my dad came into my room. "We think that your sister should learn the truth. However, we have a favor to ask you. We'll talk to her, but first we wondered if you'd like to write her a letter, telling her how you feel." Normally, this would be something I would refuse, but I was happy to do it. Yet, I realized that writing such a letter was a lot more difficult than I expected. Yes, from my perspective, nothing had changed, but what was my sister going to think when she found out that she was adopted? How could I explain this without hurting her? I thought about it for days. I'd start and erase it over and over. I didn't even have the first sentence. Then, I had an idea. If she was adopted, for how long had she been my sister? I mean, was she here when I was born? Or did she come after me? I tried to remember our oldest memory to figure this out. There were so many memories from the time when I was a toddler, but which one was the oldest? I decided that the one that I barely remembered must have been the oldest. In this memory, we're somewhere where there are a lot of kids. We are running towards something. I don't know where this was. Like I said, I barely remember it. I trip on something and fall. Only one of the kids stops. The one who stops is, of course, my sister. She helps me up, checks if my knees are scraped, and then picks me up. Then we start running towards the other kids. I started my letter with this memory. "You've been my sister all this time, and you'll always be my sister," I continued. "Not having the same mother does not weaken our bond, but only makes it stronger." I started crying, telling her how much I loved her, how I'll always love her, and that nothing will change that. Every word I wrote was true. I just wrote whatever I was feeling. Finally, the big day arrived. My dad texted me during the day asking, "Is your letter ready?" When I said that it was, "You can give it to her tonight," he said. It wasn't tense at home anymore. It was like we were all finally relaxed and in a really good mood. When my dad signaled me with his eyes, I knew it was time. "Let's meet in my office," he said. My sister was there when I entered. The wooden box that started it all was on the desk. My parents were smiling. I had put the letter in an envelope. I gave it to my sister. She was shocked. She gave me a piece of paper too. When I opened it, I saw that it was a letter that started with, "My dear Adam." I was so confused. Why did she write me a letter? We went to opposite corners of the room to read. I couldn't believe my eyes. My sister was saying that I was adopted. Just like me, she had written about how much she loved me and that whether or not I was her biological brother made no difference to her. After reading, we first looked at each other and then to our parents. My dad took out the adoption papers from the box and told us to come closer. He showed us the folder. Yes, we were both adopted. It wasn't just my sister. I was adopted too. My sister and I looked at each other. We couldn't help it and started laughing. There was no distinction between us. We were in the same boat. We shared the same fate. We hugged each other. Then my parents joined in. The four of us hugged for a while. Then we went to dinner. My parents apologized for keeping this a secret. They said they were going to tell us when the time was right, but that the chocolates had accelerated the process. When the whole thing began, my mom called a psychiatrist that she works with. She said this wasn't her specialty and asked the child psychologist to help out. That's how this idea of letters came up. My parents thought it was a good plan, so they took action. Well, you know the rest. We learned something else that day, too. My parents had intended to only adopt my sister. They didn't know about me. But my sister didn't want to leave me behind. She threw herself on the floor, crying, "He is my brother. I won't leave Adam here," she kept saying. Apparently, she named me Adam. We're not sure, but we think that it's a name from her biological family. My parents caved in and decided to adopt us both. As you can see, we were really siblings from the beginning. Thank you for listening to me. If you want to share something that happened to you and that really affected you, send an email to the address in the info section. Bye.